It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of self-reliance. An Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
This is our country.
Good evening and welcome again to An Economy of One. I am your host, Gary Rathbun. Our website, aneconomyofone.com. I want to get right to our next guest. Joining me now is H. Sterling Burnett, PhD. He's with the Heartland Institute, and he's a managing editor of Environment and Climate News. Dr. Burnett, welcome to An Economy of One.
Thanks for having me back on, Gary.
I appreciate it. We had a good talk last time. I wanted to have you back since tomorrow is Earth Day, and I'm sure that you're going to be covering all the celebrations around the country and certainly the signing of the Paris Climate Accord or whatever it's called. So
well, Gary, it's fairly ironic. I'm traveling. You caught me at a conference in Philadelphia.
Oh,
and
okay.
so I'm here in the cradle, in the birthplace of our republic, where political liberty, in one sense, was born. And we're here to discuss Earth Day, which is a slap in the face to our founders. Our founders would be appalled to realize that someone's private property could be virtually taken from them, basically, if not taken physically, certainly controlled by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., because there's a puddle of water on it that they now declare a wetland. They'd be appalled that if there was a species that some people considered endangered, you would not be able to use your property. That if you had a productive coal vein, you couldn't develop it now because the government would physically bankrupt you. We've turned this nation on its head. We celebrate Earth Day and we demean the founding of this country and what it stood for.
Yeah, we've talked a lot on the show about private property. Private property, to me, is why this country was founded. And to me, that's the foundation of liberty. If you don't have private property, if there is no right to your private property, then we don't have any liberty. They can just take it away. And in all seriousness, let's just touch on some of the things that's going on. I don't know if we talked last time about this or not, about the several attorneys general that are going after. Okay, let's talk about that, because they're going after Exxon. They're going after some allies, CEI. They'll probably go after other oil companies. We quite frankly, Competitive Enterprise Institute, that's a think tank in D.C., for your listeners who may not be aware, it has done a lot of work on climate change. So has the Heartland Institute. And so as soon as we heard CEI had been served, we've been expecting a subpoena, every day since. And once again, the irony. I'm sitting here in Philadelphia where the Constitution was written. What's the First Amendment of the Constitution? Congress shall make no law. Part of it, abridging freedom of the speech. Right.
Well, they are trying to prosecute people like myself, like Exxon, like CEI, for speaking freely, for debating a political issue. I mean, that's you may not think every part of speech is covered by the First Amendment. I disagree, but we can argue that. But no one can argue that it wasn't meant to protect political speech. But here we are. The attorneys general of several states, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the attorney general of the United States are threatening to prosecute climate skeptics for speaking their mind.
Yeah, I mean, I said something on the show earlier that free speech, the First Amendment is designed for speech you don't agree with. Nobody has a problem with free speech if you agree with everything you hear. So the First Amendment covers stuff that you don't necessarily agree with. And what scares me, partially, I mean, the attorneys general conspiring together against free speech bothers me a lot. But by the attorneys general getting together doing that, it validates, I think, a lot of these college students' thoughts because they want to ban free speech openly. I mean, they come right out and say they want to ban the First Amendment and free speech.
Anything that would offend somebody, we've got to get rid of it. Offense is now legally actionable harm.
Yeah.
It's amazing how far this country has fallen. It's your property is threatened, your freedom of association is threatened, your freedom of speech is threatened. And the funny thing is, the same amendment that protects the free speech protects the press, and the press is going merrily along with this.
Right.
They stand silent. You know, the press. Say what you will. The Ku Klux Klan can march in an unpopular place. You know, I don't know any place they're popular, but they can march, and the ACLU and everyone jumps up and down and defends their rights to do so.
Right.
Black Lives Matter can march and protest, and everyone defends their right to do so. But you say, I don't believe we can show humans are causing dangerous climate change, and it's time for the gulags. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible. Now, tomorrow, many of the world's leaders are going to sign this, I don't know what they call it, the Paris Accord? Or
the Paris Climate Agreement, yeah.
The Paris Climate Agreement.
It's not a treaty because that would require Senate ratification. It's just a piece of paper that we say we're going to do some things, but no one has to actually legally do anything. I like to call it the Paris Hot Air Agreement. It literally, it's about hot air, and it is hot air because there is no legally binding, legally enforceable mechanism to get countries that are signing on to this to do anything. They don't even. You know, one of the key features of it was supposed to be creating this climate fund for developing countries where we pay off their corrupt political leaders so they don't allow development in their country, keeping the poor, but keeping the leaders rich. Right. So you're supposed to set up this fund. It doesn't even require that people contribute to the fund. It can't force you. We're going to use moral suasion. We're going to lead by example. So what the Obama administration does, it takes $500 million from other programs and puts it into a program that Congress specifically said you can't fund.
Right. You know, every time I look at stuff like this, you know, I mean, the article I read, I forget where I saw it, was talking about the U.S. and China, the two biggest contributors of greenhouse gases. Both have said they're going to sign the document. And every time I see stuff like this, all I see is our politicians using it to grab more power and saying, well, we gave our word. We're morally committed to this document. Right. And China, you know, they second largest economy, they're an emerging market, classified an emerging market, so they don't have to follow the world's rules around pollution and civil rights and human rights, that kind of stuff. Seems like we're the only one funding things. We're the only one penalizing ourselves for...
That would be fair. China made commitments in this agreement that they say they will follow. They made commitments. We have to cut our emissions by 28% by 2030. This is something we have agreed, though not legally bound ourselves, because that would require Congress to agree. Right. We have said we would do it. Now, as you say, he'll go around saying, we have to do this. Our leadership in the world will be challenged if we don't. China, they're signing the agreement. Their agreement is by 2030 to 2050, we think that we will reach peak emissions. So they're going to go blithely on their way, you know, putting out greenhouse gases, which by the way, I'm not worried about greenhouse gases, but if you say you are, allowing China to spew out as much as they want to for the next 14 to 34 years, and then say they're going to cap themselves or they don't say they're going to cap themselves. They said they expect their growth in emissions will stop then. Mm-hmm. Well, what will they be at? They're already the largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. They're almost double our emissions. Right. I mean, you can't solve, if you really believe greenhouse gas emissions are a problem, you can't solve it if China gets to keep on spewing emissions. Right.
Well, and earlier, before China became the economic power it is, Russia was the same way. The Russian pollution in their environment and stuff, they didn't follow any accords. I mean, people are dying of cancer and lakes are drying up and all kinds of nasty stuff over there, and we're the ones being penalized. Now, That being said, tomorrow Earth Day. I mean, it was created in 1970, I believe, because of an oil spill off California the year before. This has grown into a big deal. Now, I live out in the country, and I personally celebrate Earth Day by burning a tire. I do it every year. One of these days somebody's going to take me serious and come out and put me in jail. But it's just grown into this accepted attitude about we've got to take away more of our liberties for the environment.
Well, I believe that we should celebrate Earth Day every day. Mm-hmm. There's no question that Earth gives us the resources, or at least holds the resources that we, through our ingenuity, have figured out how to use to our betterment.
Mm-hmm.
No one. I don't know that person. I mean, there may be a person, but I don't know the person who says, I hope I destroy the Earth and all the good things on it so my kids live worse than the next generation. I don't know that person.
Right.
What we know is, through our use of fossil fuels and other resources, we have made human life better.
Mm-hmm.
We have taken a climate, a world that was hostile to us, that didn't provide enough food on its own to feed populations. So we had, the entire Earth was always on the verge of constant starvation and famine if one bad season came.
Mm-hmm.
And we have taken it, and we now have, about 6 billion people who are better fed than they've ever been,
mm-hmm.
who live better than they've ever been, because we have learned how to coax the earth to provide. Now, there's still 1.2 billion people who are living in penury, who are living in abject poverty and still face the threats that all mankind face for the vast majority of human history. And now the environmentalists have said, we've got our wealth, and we want playgrounds for the rest of the earth, so they've got to stay poor.
Right.
And that is morally abominable. That's terrible. And the thing is, they're destroying the environment because we don't allow them access to, like, fossil fuels. They cut down their forests to burn trees for charcoal so they can heat their homes, and they're dying of lung disease. Our forests are regrowing because we've become wealthy, and we now put more towards the environment. But they're still struggling, and we should be allowing them, if not helping them, to develop.
Absolutely.
And that means using more fossil fuels.
We're talking with H. Sterling Burnett. He's a research fellow for the environmental policy at the Heartland Institute. Dr. Burnett, I got a few more questions for you, and I got to take a break. Can you hang on for a couple minutes?
Sure will.
I appreciate it. I'm Gary Rathbun. This is an Economy of One.
This is an Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
We're speaking with H. Sterling Burnett, Ph.D. from the Heartland Institute. Dr. Burnett, just before we went into break, you mentioned how important fossil fuels were to progress, to wealth, to getting people out of poverty, to capitalism in general, or economics in general. Do you see the alternative energies, the solar, the wind, and that kind of stuff ever being, well, not ever, but in the near future being a viable replacement for fossil fuels?
No, certainly not. As fast as the price of wind and solar has fallen, natural gas prices have fallen even faster. And natural gas is right now the cheapest form of electricity production. And the thing is, let's just think about wind and solar. Okay, so to build 1,000 megawatt, which is your average large power plant now, 1,000 megawatt power plant that can serve over 100,000 people. For wind power, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres.
Wow.
For solar power, you're talking about tens of thousands of acres. But they only operate on average, about 30% of the time. Solar power is about 23% of the time. Okay, so because you can't run a grid on power that you don't know when it's going to be there, but on average it's only going to be 23% of the time, what do you have to do? You also have to build a natural gas plant now. Now, so what you've built basically is a new natural gas plant with a supplement of 230 megawatts of wind when it's available, or solar when it's available. So every time you build a big farm, hundreds of thousand acres, you also build a 10-acre natural gas plant. Now, you tell me which is better for the environment, 10 acres or 100,000 acres. A natural gas plant that's not killing birds or other wildlife, or a solar plant that's flying them in the air, or a wind farm that's chopping them up. They, a scientist at the Sierra Club at one time called wind farms the Cuisinarts of the air because of how many birds they kill.
Yeah.
So, whether it's energy production or whether it's environmental protection, if you care about the environment, you should love fossil fuels. That's my message for Earth Day.
Well, and aren't the known reserves in America like 1 trillion cubic meters of natural gas or something? I mean, it's just huge how much we have, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't tell you what the known reserves are, but I think that right now they believe we have 150 to 200 years of natural gas. We've got 400 years of coal.
Wow.
We're the Saudi Arabia of coal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall off the top of my head how much oil we have, but what we know is we're adding to our oil reserves even as oil prices are falling.
Right.
We are becoming more energy independent, less open to political machinations by governments that often are hostile to us.
Mm-hmm.
And, energy-wise, America is almost in as good a place as it could ever be as far as the abundance. Now, whether we can use that energy, that's another question. Right now, we're shutting down coal-fired power plants and coal mines and coal companies as fast as we can. Mm-hmm. That's the one promise that I can think of that President Obama has kept. Before he ever ran for president, someone asked him about coal-fired power plants. He says, you can build one if you want to, but we'll bankrupt you. And that's what they've done. Just last week, the third largest coal company in the nation declared bankruptcy. And it's not due, it's in part due to low natural gas prices, but that wouldn't matter if they could keep their existing coal-fired power plants operating. Right. But they can't because the regulations are shutting them down.
On the flip side, how much of our tax money has gone to solar company boondoggles, that kind of stuff. I mean, Edison just filed for bankruptcy like yesterday or today. Yeah. And, Solyndra and Enter1. And I mean, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. No,
billions of dollars. For Solyndra, it was $500 million by itself, but Sun Edison got billions of dollars. Oh, Abengoa, which is a Spanish company, the largest solar company in the world probably, a Spanish company received over $2 billion, almost $2.5 billion in subsidies from us. And they're declaring bankruptcy. Yeah. And they've got a huge share of the world market. But even with government subsidies, even with government mandates that you have to use this type of energy, these companies don't make economic sense, and so they're going under left and right.
But yet people are getting rich from that. I mean, if you're well connected, why you get the crony bonus there. So.
Yeah, the politically connected always get rich. Even as Solyndra was struggling, the Department of Energy was shoveling them money, and they were holding fundraisers for President Obama. Yep. And he was out at their plant speaking. Less than a year after he spoke about how this is the future, they closed the doors.
Right. Absolutely incredible. Well, we've been speaking with Dr. H. Sterling Burnett. He's a research fellow for environmental policy at the Heartland Institute. And Dr. Burnett, I'm going to leave you this one thought because I heard it on the radio the other day. The guy was talking about Earth Day, and, it came about because of 1969, so it was created in 1970. And this guy decided that Earth Day was created to remind people once a year who took a lot of drugs in the 60s what planet they actually live on.
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that Earth Day falls on, I used to know this, it's either Marx's or Lenin's birthday.
It was Hitler's birthday, wasn't it? Didn't we?
No, it's either Marx or Lenin.
Marx or Lenin. Okay.
But it's one of their birthdays, and that's when they declared Earth Day.
Okay. Well, so I don't believe in coincidences there.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and informative as always. You're doing great work over the Heartland Institute, and I thank you for that. And hope we can tap you on the shoulder again soon.
I look forward to being on. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good evening. I'm Gary Rathman. This is an Economy of One.